How cold! Bai Zimin shivered fiercely when he felt the cold temperatures of the outside world. Although the interior of the sports center wasn't particularly warm, the building insulated the strong gusts of near-freezing wind and protected the body from the constant fall of water coming from the clouds. While it was true that Bai Zimin's body had gone through many improvements since the day before, the day the world had become a mess, his stamina and health were his two lowest stats so far in regards to the cold. He wasn't much different from a normal person, just slightly above comparatively. While your strength increased exponentially, hardening and boosting the power of your body's muscles, if you want to become more resistant to different environments as well as to prevent possible diseases, among other issues, your stamina and health stats are the most important, Lilith explained as she walked beside him. Unlike Bai Zimin, who was already completely soaked beyond salvation, there was a small barrier covering Lilith's body completely, so she was as beautiful and sensual as ever. Not even a single drop of rain had touched her body. "Can you cover me too?" he asked with a bit of envy. The water and wind really were too strong. His body temperature had plummeted only after several minutes, and his stamina was drying up much faster than normal as a result of the strong winds. "I'm sorry, but I can't do that." Lilith shook her head with a bitter smile and explained. "To be honest with you, except for giving you some information, it will be better for you if you assume as if I'm not here. Unless someone attacks me directly, I cannot use my power in any way to help anyone or harm anyone in this world, or the soul record will revoke most of my soul power immediately as punishment." The corner of Bai Zimin's mouth twitched several times when he heard it. Although from the beginning he had not expected to receive Lilith's help, hearing her directly say that she could do nothing but act as a source of information still surprised him. "You're basically useless, aren't you?" After so long of being teased and tempted by her, Bai Zimin couldn't help but counterattack, taking advantage of the moment. But who was Lilith, an existence with countless experiences? She nodded and made a sorrowful face as she said in a regretful voice, "That's right, I'm just a pitiful, useless woman who has nothing else to do but provide information that would sooner or later be discovered by you. Got it. How about I use my body to redeem myself?" Bai Zimin's face turned pitch black when he heard Lilith's words. With no intention of replying to her, knowing that it would only end in his loss, he advanced and casually decapitated two zombies wandering under the storm. The two zombies were decapitated with such ease and in two extremely fluid movements, as if Bai Zimin was venting his powerlessness on them. Seeing the dark expression on his face and seeing how he was clenching his teeth while killing the zombies, Lilith couldn't help but point out, "Oh, could it be that you have opened your eyes to violence?" With agile movements, and as if he had done this for countless years throughout his life, Bai Zimin claimed the lives of 5 other zombies that had come out of a nearby building as he replied, "That's right, violence is fun. One day I'll kick your ass too." "Kya!" Lilith let out a delighted yell, and her face flushed as if she was a woman who knew nothing about life. She looked at Bai Zimin through her long eyelashes and whispered, "Instead of kicking me, I would rather you spank me with your big hands, too." Bai Zimin, : He who was killing zombies like that as if it was nothing, lost his balance and almost fell to the ground when he heard the words of the seductive woman beside him. In his mind, an extremely depraved scene flashed, and he had to shake his head fiercely to bring himself back to reality. Wisely, he decided to stop teasing her and continued moving forward. Seeing him silently admit defeat, Lilith giggled out loud, causing her big assets to show off their beauty and charm to the world. The university pharmacy was located in a westerly direction from where the gymnasium was located. Normally, a 10-minute walk was enough to get there. After all, the pharmacy that contained most of the medicines and healing measures was most needed by people who played sports and were susceptible to injuries during training. But if a normal person wanted to reach the pharmacy under such environmental conditions and with so many dangers, he or she would definitely die miserably without even knowing what had happened to him. Even Bai Zimin did not dare to act rampantly. The fog was so dense that it was difficult for him to see more than 5 meters in front of his eyes, and this was already amazing on its own. A normal person without as many upgrades as Bai Zimin probably couldn't even see their own nose at this moment. While advancing with careful but constant and solid steps, Bai Zimin suddenly felt a strange movement from his left side. Not caring about anything but his own safety, he directly kicked with all his might in that direction. His left leg had turned into a whip-like weapon. His 69 agility points cut the surrounding mist in two, and his 55 strength points blasted out when he felt his leg hit something hard. Roar! The enemy roared in pain and was sent flying several meters away. Although it was only for a split second that the surrounding mist was forced back by his strong and swift movement, Bai Zimin managed to see the silhouette of his enemy before sending it flying, causing it to disappear into the mist again. The enemy turned out to be a cat the size of a leopard. That cry of pain sounded more like a tiger's roar than a cat's meow. Bai Zimin was stupefied. His movement stopped completely, and he concentrated on the movement of the surrounding mist, with his eyes not too useful under such conditions. If it was before he learned the passive skill Special Forces Soldier, Bai Zimin would have been killed by the earlier attack of the leopard-sized cat. After all, his combat experience was deficient, and losing most of his vision would make it incredibly difficult for him to sense and dodge that surprise attack. However, now not only could he sense the attack, but instead of dodging, he managed to make a last-second counterattack. The opposite huge cat was even faster and more agile than the mantis that Bai Zimin had killed yesterday. Adding to the surrounding mist, he had no way to use his blood manipulation skills since he didn't even know where the enemy was. Unlike animals, humans did not have a particularly strong sense of smell in comparison, and now that animals have become powerful beasts after evolving, their senses have been amplified countless times more than in the past. Swoosh! Almost 5 minutes after standing in the same place without moving, a practically imperceptible swooshing sound was covered by the sound of the storm, but Bai Zimin's battle instinct had taken a quantum leap after learning the passive skill Special Forces Soldier, so that such sound did not manage to escape him. In a split second, 2 blood-red eyes appeared in front of Bai Zimin, and a pair of coldly glowing claws pointed towards his head with the intention of slashing his neck. Swoosh! Boom! A sharp flash shone, followed by a mighty thunderclap that shook the ground slightly before everything returned to normal. You have acquired the soul power of Great Mutated Cat level 23, Agility plus 17, Stamina plus 12, Magic plus 10, Mana plus 10. Bai Zimin coldly looked at the body of the level 23 Great Mutated Cat that was cut in 2 parts with a swing of his Zhuan Yuan sword, and marveled at the feeling of power. From a certain point of view, this leopard-sized Great Mutated Cat was even more fearsome than the Great Fast Mantis, as its agility was superior and the environment played in his favor. However, Bai Zimin needed only 1 swing of his sword to end with its life. While it was true that the Great Mutated Cat was faster, and the mist, the sound of thunder as well as the constant rain blocked Bai Zimin's senses, except for its speed and sharp claws, the terror of this mutated beast could not compare to the Great Fast Mantis level 25. The Great Fast Mantis possessed 2 forelegs that were like 2 huge scythes, capable of holding Bai Zimin's Xuanyan sword, which was a rare grade treasure for a certain period of time. In addition, the battle instincts of the Great Fast Mantis were much greater than those of the Great Mutated Cat. Furthermore, the Bai Zimin at that time was much weaker than the one who fought against the Great Mutated Cat. As if all of the above were not enough, the Great Mutated Cat had been seriously injured by Bai Zimin's earlier kick. After all, the cat was a creature that specialized in agility, but whose defense was lacking, so when Bai Zimin's 50-plus strength points came into contact with the beast's weak body, several internal organs probably suffered the consequences, lowering the creature's threat by a considerable margin. After making sure there was no danger nearby, Bai Zemin crouched down and picked up a red orb that had fallen from the monster's body before quickly putting it away in his backpack. Bai Zemin did not delay and continued moving towards his destination. After another 5 minutes in which more than 20 zombies perished by decapitation at Bai Zemin's hands, he finally saw the small building where medicines and other medical-related items were kept. Bai Zemin kicked open the door, and a shadow shot out towards him. The shadow's speed was slightly above a normal person before the world changed, and would probably be the doom of any other human being. Even an evolved person could fall, as the attack was too sudden. However, Bai Zemin was currently 8 times faster than a normal person before the arrival of the apocalypse. His reaction speed had become simply dreadful, and his guard was always up, so in the face of the sudden attack, he did not panic. Taking a step back, Bai Zemin kicked forward with all his might. His foot struck the shadow's chest. However, surprisingly, the shadow was not sent flying after being hit and only retreated a couple of steps. Bai Zemin was astonished. With his 55 strength points, that previous kick could easily kill a person after being hit in the chest. The shadow was actually a huge zombie. The giant zombie's body was surrounded by fat that acted as a protective layer. Its 2 bloodshot eyes glared at Bai Zemin with fury, as if it could feel pain, and quickly charged towards him. The giant zombie's fist was slow in Bai Zemin's eyes. He took a step to the left at the same time as he kicked the zombie's front foot. The giant zombie, losing its supporting foot and with its forward momentum, fell heavily, creating a small bang when its body hit the ground. Bai Zemin advanced quickly, and instead of decapitating the creature, he stabbed with his sword directly into its brain. That way, although blood would flow out of the wound, it would not shoot out like a fountain. You have acquired the soul power of Zombie Wallbreaker level 20. Strength plus 10, Stamina plus 10, Health plus 10. Although Bai Zemin was surprised that he didn't level up even once, his attention was soon drawn to a skill scroll. Health Boost, Unclassified Passive Skill, Level 3. After learning this skill, it permanently increases health by 20 points. Oh, this is good! Bai Zemin was excited and quickly decided to learn the skill scroll in his hands. A passive skill that increased stats was no different than obtaining soul power from another living being. Moreover, considering the boost was of 20 points, not just any insignificant creature would give such an amount of soul power. Bai Zemin couldn't help but wonder if Liang Peng had obtained a similar skill to boost his strength stat. Although he did not believe that his strength was in any way weaker, and in fact, he was confident in surpassing him, it was truly amazing that in such a short time, Liang Peng could lift and wield a hammer that clearly weighed 200 kilograms as if it was nothing. The pharmacy was a multi-story building. However, Bai Zemin had no intention of inspecting the entire building. The first thing he did was fill his backpack with fever medicine, cold medicine, medicine to relieve stomach pain, even medicine for muscle pain, and some vitamin pills. 10 minutes later, his backpack was filled with boxes containing all kinds of basic but essential medicine for any human being. Next, he found several plastic bags and then began to inspect the shelves one by one. As Bai Zemin searched for gauze, band-aids, alcohol, and other types of first aid utilities, he even kept a syringe and some doses of morphine that could be useful in emergencies. But suddenly, a wild idea that he had been ignoring until now flashed in his mind. Lilith, don't tell me that viruses also evolve with mana. If viruses also evolve, then not only is everything he is currently doing pointless, but countless people will die from now on due to diseases. In fact, it's likely that more deaths would be caused by diseases rather than by other savage monsters. Fortunately, Lilith's next words eased his worries. You need not worry, since single-celled organisms such as viruses cannot resist mana, and their evolutive process is extremely limited, so the world's mana directly ignores them. Bai Zemin unconsciously let out a sigh of relief.
If the case was as he had assumed, then he would have no choice but to find his family quickly and help them evolve so that their bodies would become more resilient. As for the rest of the people, Baizemen did not think about it. He did not even notice this fact and acted as if his thoughts were normal. Unknown to him, the effect of the skill he still considered useless was changing his perspective of the world little by little. After filling several bags with all sorts of items needed to provide first aid, Baizemen took out the red orb to see what it contained. Piercing Gauntlet, normal treasure. Attacks performed with this weapon allow the user to pierce through the defense of almost any enemy below level 25. When equipped, strength +5. This gauntlet was odd in that a 30-centimeter spike protruded from the tip where the knuckles should be by default. Although +5 strength points was not as amazing as the increase of other items he had acquired so far, it was free power increase, so Baizemen equipped the gauntlet with pleasure. Suddenly, the ground began to shake slightly, and Baizemen quickly realized that this was not caused by the storm. What is that? As he approached a window, the fog seemed to be disappearing in some parts. However, the strangest thing of all was that instead of fog, a dense cloud of vapor was slowly ascending into the sky. And also, as if a giant was slowly advancing, the ground was constantly vibrating and the buildings were shaking lightly. Baizemen? As he watched the environmental change outside the window and prepared to leave the building for fear of its collapse, Lilith's serious voice sounded beside him. When Baizemen turned around to look at her, and for the first time since he met her, he saw a grave and even a little anxious expression on her face. Lilith looked out the window and warned him, "You'd better get ready because this could be your first life-and-death battle. If you win, you will undoubtedly become stronger. If you lose, then your path can only end here."
Since Baizemen met Lilith, only about a day had passed. Although it was not a long time, his mind had already formed a small idea of the kind of person she was most of the time. Playful, charming, even a little mischievous. As for kind, Baizemen restrained himself from thinking about that possibility since he didn't believe Lilith was helping him out of pure kindness. Still, it was undeniable that she had helped him on many occasions by providing him with information that, while he might have discovered on his own after some research, it was also true that time was precious in eras of chaos. However, this was the first time Baizemen had seen such a serious expression on her face, and although he was not so sure, there even seemed to be a touch of anxiety in her voice. "I won't die, at least I have no intention of dying yet," Baizemen replied as he shook his head. Lilith was a little surprised to realize how calm he sounded when he said those words. She looked at him as he took off his backpack and left the plastic bags containing medicines hidden in a corner, and her eyes couldn't help but glint with a hint of praise and even a small glint of unfamiliar satisfaction. "You know, you really are a weirdo," Lilith pointed out as she walked beside him in the direction of the exit. "You think so? Well, I've been told that many times." Baizemen shrugged and held on tightly to his sword as his eyes flashed with a hint of resolve. "You really aren't afraid of dying? This time you really might die." She raised an eyebrow and reminded him. "I am afraid to die. Of course I'm scared." Baizemen nodded impatiently and continued. "But what I'm afraid of is not death itself. What I'm afraid of is not being able to see Meng-Chi and my parents again. What I'm scared of is not being able to help them when they need me. But I am not afraid of death. For me, death is no different than eternal sleep. And you know what? I love to sleep." "You—" Hearing that he even dared to joke in such a situation, Lilith couldn't know whether to laugh or cry, and a look of helplessness shone in her beautiful eyes. My God! As the heavy rain poured down on his body and lightning lit up the sky quite frequently, Baizemen looked at the scene in front of him, and his heart squeezed slightly. The dense fog in the surroundings had disappeared, and a ring of at least 100 meters around was now visible. However, what surprised Baizemen was that in the middle of the building there was a monster as big as an elephant. This monster had various parts of its body surrounded with yellow flames that danced at high temperatures, which erased the surrounding fog. Its body was about 3.5 meters long and was surrounded by a thick kind of armor that glowed as if it were metal. Its 6 legs were as thick as a door, and it had a powerful horn nearly 2 meters long protruding from its mouth. Since when did elephant beetles get so big and have flames around them? Bai Zemin felt his hair stand on end as he saw the giant insect slowly advancing towards him while looking at him with its 2 eyes filled with murderous intent. "Stop joking," Lilith struck him gently and warned. "That's a monster that has already gone through its first evolution. That is a first-order monster. Besides, as you also realized, that insect already knows you, so it will chase you no matter how much you run away." Bai Zemin nodded silently as he rushed towards another building nearby. With a heavy stomp, the ground beneath his feet shuddered softly, and using his 70 strength points, he jumped over 3 meters with relative ease. This such feat would be impossible before the advent of the soul record and without the aid of soul power, but with the power of evolution available to all, the rules of the past were no longer written in stone. Upon reaching the top, Bai Zemin observed the large insect covered in flames approaching in his direction. The pressure he felt just from being watched by that pair of red eyes was so immense that he had to resist the urge to turn around and leave. Lilith tried to help him in every possible way so that he could survive and pass this test, so she quickly explained. Upon reaching level 25, all living beings acquire the ability to choose a job or class. As you advance in order, the power of each living being becomes tremendously higher, and the difference is not as simple as adding 1 plus 1. The difference between level 24 and level 25 is as big as the difference between level 1 and level 24, if not bigger. "Then what about yesterday's mantis?" Bai Zemin quickly asked. In his battle against the great fast mantis, Bai Zemin had been in danger several times, and a single mistake would have cost him his life. However, he never at any time felt such immense pressure as he was feeling right now as he came face to face against the giant elephant beetle. According to what Lilith had just said, that level 25 great fast mantis should already be a first-order creature, but he wanted to know why the difference was so great. To obtain said class and then evolve to become a first-order existence, every living being needs to overcome a test and fulfill a challenge. Until said challenge is not overcome, all soul power received will be stored, and leveling up will not be possible. That mantis you killed yesterday was still just an evolved creature, but it had not yet taken the first true step on the path of evolution. However, that giant elephant beetle is definitely a first-order creature. Those flames around it must be its special skill acquired after successfully obtaining its job. Bai Zemin finally understood everything. He nodded and thanked her before half-closing his eyes towards the incoming creature. The giant elephant beetle was currently less than 20 meters away, and strange roars came out of its mouth as it stared at him intently. The murderous intent exuding from its body was so immense that even its own flames seemed to grow stronger. Obviously, this creature could sense the soul power inside Bai Zemin's body and was eager to devour him. Although Bai Zemin was barely level 15, because he had been fighting and defeating enemies of a higher level than him since the beginning, stealing some of their soul power in the process, his own soul power was extremely rich at this moment. If the giant elephant beetle could absorb it, it could definitely evolve even further. However, the giant elephant beetle was not the only one who thought like this. Bai Zemin licked his lips, and a flash of wildness flashed in his eyes for a split second, before disappearing and hiding under that cold gaze. Lilith thought he was silent because he was nervous or thinking about his next action, so she stood there, trying to give all her moral support at least. "I wonder." Hearing that he even dared to joke in such a situation, Lilith couldn't know whether to laugh or cry, and a look of helplessness shone in her beautiful eyes. "My God, I wonder how much I'll grow after killing this beetle," he exclaimed.
The surrounding mana moved at his will, and the magical power within his body burst forth completely without holding back as he focused on his enemy 10 meters away.
Bai Zemin's body currently had a mana reserve of 134 points, and his magic points were equal. Before the soul record showed up on planet Earth, activating the world's mana and displaying each person's status window, it was precisely his magic stat that caught the attention of the beautiful and charming succubus, Lilith. Until now, Bai Zemin had never used all of his magical power to the fullest, since he never found himself in need of it. However, in the face of the approaching giant elephant beetle, he had no choice but to give his all if he wanted to survive. With a single thought, Bai Zemin spent his 134 mana points immediately and pushed all that mana with his 134 magic points towards the giant beetle. When the mana under his control flowed into the creature's body, Bai Zemin immediately activated his first-order blood manipulation skill. His face turned as pale as a sheet, and his whole body felt weak after the abrupt loss of his mana reserve. However, he endured and began to make the blood burn inside the monster while using all his magical power. The results were immediately evident. Roar! A sound similar to that of a wounded beast roaring came from the mouth of the 10-foot elephant beetle. When it was only 5 meters away from being able to attack with its giant horn, its movements stopped, and it raised its head to the sky while writhing uncomfortably, as if it was suffering the most terrifying pain of all torments. Bai Zemin's blood manipulation skill was indeed powerful, just as Lilith had mentioned earlier. It's just that until now, Bai Zemin had only faced mainly dead creatures that did not feel pain, nor did they know the meaning of the word scared. By controlling his mana to get inside the enemy's body, Bai Zemin could make use of all his magic to activate his blood manipulation. The problem with this was that the cost was too heavy, much heavier than Bai Zemin thought. The elephant beetle writhed in pain, and its giant body struck a nearby building. The seemingly sturdy and robust building's foundation couldn't even stand for 5 seconds before collapsing with a loud explosion and raising a cloud of dust. Before the apocalypse, humans had no mana inside their bodies. However, with the intervention of the soul record, Bai Zemin's mana points were especially high. Now that he had used all his mana to execute a powerful attack, he felt as if he had lost all the sugar in his blood, and his body felt extremely weak. However, he had no choice but to grit his teeth and hold on. His pale face without a trace of blood looked at his enemy, and a bitter smile appeared at the corner of his mouth when he saw the 3-meter elephant beetle stand up again. Roar! The monster glared at him with murderous intent, and its 2 eyes seemed to spit flames of rage as it headed towards him with somewhat unsteady steps. Its body was stained with blood, and its armor-like shell had small cracks through which boiling blood seeped. When the blood came in contact with the yellow flames on its body, the liquid began to evaporate at astonishing speeds, rising in a gaseous cloud into the sky. Seeing this, Bai Zemin inwardly felt happy not to use external blood attacks, or else he would only be wasting mana. After all, flames could be considered the perfect counter to his blood manipulation skill. The wounded elephant beetle reached the building Bai Zemin was standing on and slammed its horn forward with all its might. Bai Zemin's face changed when he saw the creature's intentions, and he hurriedly jumped off the building to the ground and rolled to the side. Boom! As if a demolition machine had hit it mercilessly, the 3-meter-high building collapsed immediately and soon joined with the previously demolished building by the elephant beetle. Stones of all sizes flew everywhere, and although Bai Zemin had rolled to the side at the first possible moment, he was still hit by a considerably large block of stone. Ugh! His body was sent flying 2 or 3 meters as he grimaced in pain, and a small trail slid silently from the corner of his mouth. If it wasn't for the fact that his muscles were much stronger than in the past, that cement block would have left him half dead if not severely injured. Without giving him time to rest, the elephant beetle turned and rushed in his direction, while the fury in its gaze seemed to consume him alive. Although its defenses and attack power were quite high, its internal body was weak like that of any other living being. Bai Zemin's previous attack had damaged its organs, its flesh, and much of its blood disappeared due to the high temperatures of its flames. As a monster that had already passed its first evolution, successfully becoming a first-order monster, the elephant beetle could be considered a small overlord in this area. Now that a weaker creature had injured it to such an extent, it was naturally furious. After seeing what the elephant beetle did to the building with its horn, Bai Zemin did not dare to fight it head-on. Taking advantage of the fact that his speed was superior to that of the wounded creature, Bai Zemin endured the feeling of weakness he felt after the abrupt loss of mana and grit his teeth fighting against the pain as he ran in search of another building he could quickly climb. One running and turning into different streets, while the other relentlessly pursued and crushed everything in its path, Bai Zemin and the elephant beetle sought to end each other's lives in different ways. It was clear to Bai Zemin that he simply could not win in a face-to-face battle against the elephant beetle. All his body stats were below the creature, except for his agility. Therefore, to survive and win, he had to make use of his intelligence. After running mercilessly after its hated enemy for almost 10 minutes, the elephant beetle had demolished more than 7 buildings of different sizes. However, as a consequence, a look of exhaustion flashed in its eyes. The constant loss of blood was something the creature could not bear, and although its flames were a powerful defensive skill, the elephant beetle could not use it to attack, therefore only served to keep its enemies away from its body. However, to keep its skill active at all times, the elephant beetle had to expend too much mana, and after so many powerful attacks, its stamina was also quickly running out. Bai Zemin also noticed the change of pace in the creature's steps and hurriedly jumped to a nearby building, hoping to end this battle as quickly as possible. His own stamina had dropped by more than half, and he had only recovered more than 20 mana points. After reaching the top of the building, Bai Zemin looked up to see the elephant beetle prepare to strike with its powerful horn once again. However, instead of jumping to the side, Bai Zemin jumped with all his might towards the giant beetle. Boom! Another building fell. However, its previous attack had created a big opening in its defenses, and the elephant beetle could not prevent its hated enemy from landing on top of its shell. Bai Zemin had just landed on the mutated insect's upper body when a wave of fire assaulted his lower body at once. "It hurts! It fucking hurts!" He couldn't help but scream in pain as his face constricted horribly at the sensation of being burned alive. He felt as if his lower body was suddenly submerged in a pool of burning lava, and such a feeling of pain was driving him crazy. Although his defensive cloak protected his body, from the knees downward he had nothing capable of fighting off the elephant beetle's fire. Bai Zemin could feel his legs starting to burn little by little, and the only reason why they had not yet completely caught fire was thanks to the treasure normal velocity boots he was equipped with. However, he could clearly feel the boots melting rapidly without being able to withstand the heat. Gritting his teeth and fighting the urge for his tears to involuntarily fall from the overwhelming pain, Bai Zemin ran at full speed until he reached the creature's neck. The giant elephant beetle's entire body was covered by an extremely hard shell. If Bai Zemin wanted to break through its defenses, he would need a lot of time, and that is what he lacked at the moment. However, the junction between the head and the rest of the body, the creature's neck, was not surrounded by that shell. After all, this would limit its natural movements. Bai Zemin raised his sword and slashed fiercely downward, tearing off a large chunk of flesh in the process.
Blood splattered everywhere, and fiery steam caused by the struggle between the liquid and the flames surrounded him. The giant elephant beetle sensed danger of death, and its body began to shake violently as roars of pain escaped from its mouth. For safety reasons, Bai Zemin immediately held his breath as the blood evaporated after coming into contact with the heat of the flames. He had no way of knowing if this monster's blood had obtained poisonous attributes of some kind after eating different organisms to evolve to where it was currently. In any case, with his current stamina, he could endure several minutes without breathing for several minutes without experiencing any kind of problem. Enduring the overwhelming pain that enveloped the lower part of his body and slowly began to affect the other parts, Bai Zemin raised his sword and fiercely slashed the neck of the huge creature again. Another large chunk of flesh was cut in half, and an even larger wave of blood than the previous one came out of the monster's body. The pain was so great that the giant elephant beetle began to run while roaring in pain. Boom! The huge, sturdy body of the elephant beetle hit a building, knocking it down in the process. Several stones of all sizes flew everywhere, and Bai Zemin was hit by several of them. His face constricted even more in pain, and a big stone struck his head, making him feel dizzy. He felt his whole world spinning and had to bite his lips with all his strength to the point of breaking them to fight the drowsiness that had suddenly overwhelmed him. A thick line of blood slid silently from his forehead to his left eye, partially covering his vision. Because the rainwater could not overcome the flames of the elephant beetle, the blood over his left eye accumulated until everything within his left vision range turned crimson red. Using the pain and hatred he felt after being injured to such an extent, Bai Zemin not only did not stop his attacks, on the contrary, he began to slash more and more ferociously. The Zhuan-Yun sword in his hands had become a whirlwind of blades that cut large chunks of flesh per second. The giant elephant beetle was very strong. Its defense was powerful, and its horn was strong enough to knock down minor buildings. However, its mobility was its greatest weakness. With Bai Zemin on its upper body, the giant elephant beetle had no way to reach that area, so it could only do its best to force him down from it. Roar! Like a beast that had gone completely berserk, the mutated beetle began to writhe ferociously as it slammed against every nearby building in sight. Some of these buildings collapsed immediately, while others held firm even after being hit several times. Bai Zemin's head spun, and the weakness his body and mind felt was slowly overwhelming him, to the point where even his right eye began to see his surroundings blurred. With his left eyesight practically blocked by the blood dripping from his head and his right eyesight failing due to exhaustion, Bai Zemin had turned into something similar to a machine, with the glove's protruding thorn firmly stuck into the monster's flesh to prevent himself from falling. He slashed with his sword relentlessly, knowing that stopping meant the end of his path. The thought of not falling to his death was the only thing that kept him steady. Both living beings fought for several minutes for their own survival, trying to defeat the other for a higher evolution. The sound of constant explosions caused by more than 20 buildings collapsing from the giant elephant beetle's mad charge had defeated the sound of rumbling thunder. The area surrounding the pharmacy had become a dead zone. Crushed zombies with their deformed bodies and countless cement blocks were scattered everywhere. Some of them, with their brains intact, struggled with all their strength, tearing their legs away from the rest of their bodies as they crawled towards the source of the sound. The blood of over 200 zombies, in conjunction with the huge amount of blood lost by the giant monster, had accumulated to the point where even the fierce storm had no way of washing it away as easily as before. After what seemed to be an eternity, the wild movements of the elephant beetle stopped and its charge stalled.
After the constant loss of blood, after being attacked again and again in such a delicate and deadly area by Bai Min, the beast finally lost all its energy and collapsed to the ground. Boom! An explosion similar to that of a collapsing building shook the surrounding ground, and Bai Min's body was almost sent flying. However, although he was not sent flying, the price he had to pay was high. A heartbreaking cry of pain slipped out of his mouth as he felt the bones of his left hand cracking. To hold himself steady, Bai Min had no choice but to rely on his left hand, as well as his piercing glove. However, suffering from such a sudden and abrupt impulse, his wrist that was not so flexible had bent backward. The flames on the giant elephant beetle extinguished as the beast could not withstand the energy consumption, and the new pain made Bai Min's mind clear for a moment. Making use of the sudden surge of clarity, Bai Min wielded his sword and slashed at an even faster speed than before. After cutting more than 50 times, several green letters flashed in his retina. Since the birth of all the chaos after the arrival of the Soul Record, Bai Min had never felt so happy to see those strange messages. His mouth opened and closed several times as if he wanted to say something, but in the end he was so exhausted that he did not manage to utter any words. Before the whole world went out of control, Bai Min was just a normal student who lived his daily life striving for a better future. Although he was still striving to secure a better future, everything had changed. His bones of his left hand had broken, his left eye had closed due to all the accumulated blood running from his head. Some of his dark hair had turned crimson red. His feet hurt and burned horribly, and his single open eye could hardly take in any information from the outside world. When had he ever suffered so much? Bai Min had once heard in the past that when the pain reached a certain point, the brain turned off those receptors as an automatic defense mechanism so that it was no longer possible to feel pain. Before, he was not so sure about this, but now he had confirmed it. Although he was in terrible condition, his mind was so exhausted that he no longer felt any pain. The flames surrounding the elephant beetle's shell were extinguished after its death, and the rain began to fall on the area once again after losing the burning heat that suppressed it. Standing over the 3+ meter creature, Bai Min could not help but lifted his face to the sky as he felt the raindrops falling on him. Although the battle was already over, his grip on the Zhuanyern sword had not loosened, as this sword was the only way he had to feel safe at the moment. Tired, his feet wobbled, and he could not help but fall downward. In fact, he was so exhausted that he didn't even notice he was falling to the ground. All he felt was the wind in his surroundings, and that was it. However, fortunately for him, someone caught him just as he was about to hit the ground and make his already horrible condition even worse. An extremely soft body held him gently. The sweet scent of roses, so familiar but at the same time so unfamiliar to him, enveloped his exhausted body, and as if it was the best medicine to relieve his situation, he could not help but breathe a bit more as if he was intoxicated. "Good job, Bai Min." A soft and innocent voice like that of a baby without impurities reached his ears. However, he could no longer distinguish what was what. That was a wonderful victory. You can rest now. As if they were the words of his mother and most beloved being, Bai Min obediently closed his eyes as exhaustion finally defeated him, and a smile rose unconsciously on his face. You have acquired the soul power of First Order Blazing Beetle level 30, Magic plus 50, Mana plus 70, Health plus 40, Stamina plus 28, Strength plus 15. You have leveled up and reached level 17. You get plus 2 status points to distribute freely. You have leveled up and reached level 18. You have leveled up and reached level 19. You have leveled up and reached level 20.
You get +2 status points to distribute freely.
Lilith looked at the not-so-handsome face resting shamelessly on her bosom, and a strange smile appeared on her lips as she recalled the entire process of the previous battle. Just one strike from the First Order blazing beetle was enough to kill Bai Zemin, or at the very least knock him out and render him helpless like a fish out of the ocean. However, Bai Zemin managed to evade the most dangerous attacks and was only hit by the aftermath of those attacks. Whenever his life was in danger, Lilith could only clench her fists and look on helplessly, wishing that his path would not end here. But Lilith knew very well that Bai Zemin's enemy this time was too strong. Even if his stats were overwhelmingly higher than a normal level 15 evolved due to his constant absorption of soul power from stronger enemies, the difference between a normal evolved and a first-order monster was simply too difficult to overcome. Unlike humans who acquire stat points to distribute after each level, monsters don't get any of that. However, in return, they get a powerful boost in their overall stats after successful class advancement. She led him towards the pharmacy building, which coincidentally was just a few meters away. The corpse of the First Order blazing beetle lay dead, surrounded by all sorts of debris, with almost the entirety of its huge head separated from the rest of its body. Lilith pointed towards the monster's body, and some things floated towards her. After a glance, she simply put them away. At least I can do so much. Bai Zemin couldn't rest for long. Although his mental fatigue was very great, he was feeling tearing pain and itching similar to that of thousands of red ants crawling all over his body. When he opened his eyes, he couldn't help but grimace at how horrible his current condition was. Thanks to the fact that the rainwater had washed away the blood on his face, he could now see out of his left eye. However, due to mental fatigue, his eyesight was not as focused as it used to be. The blood that was dripping from his wound after being hit by a large cement block on his head had also stopped completely, and he could feel that part of his head stinging horribly. He felt his heart bleed when he saw that the velocity boots had already melted to the point of no return. Even if it was just a normal treasure, plus 10 agility points was an improvement too great that he had suddenly lost. And moreover, looking at his practically destroyed wrist, Bai Zemin didn't know whether to feel happy or sad. Happy because he, fortunately, fractured a hand and not a leg, which would practically render him an invalid in this world. Being an invalid in a world where dangers lurked around every corner was no different than being dead. "You finally woke up, sleepyhead," a soft, honey-sweet voice brought him out of his thoughts. Looking ahead, he saw the beautiful Lilith looking down at him with a smile that, for the first time to him, looked real and not faked. "Good morning. No. How long did I sleep?" Bai Zemin suddenly became anxious about something and quickly asked as he tried to stand up. Unfortunately, he failed miserably as he felt burning pain from his feet. Only now did he realize that he had suffered different kinds of injuries during his battle against that First Order blazing beetle. If he was the previous you, he could have died. However, after absorbing an amount of soul power purer than yours, all of your stats underwent a drastic change. Your health stat also affects the speed at which your body recovers from different injuries. The reason for the itching you are feeling right now is because your high health is healing your body's wounds at higher rates than you are used to experiencing. Bai Zemin, curious, couldn't help but call up his status window to see how high his stats were now so he could draw his own conclusions. Bai Zemin, status points, 22, level, 20, race, human, job, none, title, none, strength, 55, plus 30, agility, 71, plus 5, health, 85, plus 5, stamina, 75, plus 5, mana, 199, plus 5, magic, 179, plus 5. These stats are mine? Level 20? He couldn't help but be surprised to the point of asking a meaningless question. Previously, because he had become unconscious, he didn't know how many stats he had gained after killing and absorbing part of the First Order Blazing Beetle's soul power. His stats were a completely different world from his stats before he ended the First Order monster's life. Even his level had increased by so much. "Hee, your stats right now are really scary for someone of your level," Lilith giggled softly and looked at him with glittering eyes. "I have high expectations and a lot of hope in you. I hope I wasn't wrong." Bai Zemin looked at her deeply before closing his eyes and saying casually, "You don't need to worry. I will do my best to repay you for the help you have given me so far." He already knew from before that there was no way an existence like Lilith was helping him out of the goodness of her own heart alone. All intelligent beings generally acted with a goal in mind, and she had lived for who knows how many years so far, so it was natural not to act casually and waste her time pointlessly. But it was better for him as well. That way, Bai Zemin didn't need to feel indebted to her either. "You know, men who are too smart are not very well liked," Lilith pouted charmingly, acting like a little girl. Soon, however, she smiled softly and assured him, "You don't need to worry, though. After all, my goals and your ultimate goal will align perfectly, you'll see." "If you say so," he replied, rolling his eyes. His only two current goals were to survive and find his family. As for the other goals, they were only secondary goals. Suddenly, several zombies appeared at the entrance of the building, staggering around with their white eyes showing no sign of life. Thanks to the heavy storm, the blood on their bodies had mostly been washed away, and they currently did not look as terrifying compared to before. Bai Zemin tried to stand up, but the pain he felt in his feet had reached the point that he could not move. Without any other choice, he expended some of his mana and activated his First Order blood manipulation skill. Bang, bang, bang! The eyeballs of more than 10 zombies exploded, and blood began to flow uncontrollably from the sockets. However, that blood turned into 20-centimeter-long thorns and fiercely stabbed the brains of the 10 zombies. Before Bai Zemin could let out a sigh of relief, another 5 zombies appeared at the entrance and began to slowly slide towards him. Just like before, he had no choice but to expend some of his mana to end the lives of the incoming zombies. Although the drain was fewer thanks to the blood of the zombies he had killed earlier, at this rate, all of his mana would be depleted, and with his current condition, he would end up dying miserably. Under normal conditions, even a group of 200 zombies was nothing in his eyes. However, he was currently unable to move, and if those weak level 3-4 zombies scratched him or bit his skin, no matter how high his level and stats were, he would definitely not be able to survive another day. Lilith also noticed the current problem and frowned. Previously, the reason why she was able to help Bai Zemin just as he was about to hit the ground was because the battle had already ended and did not count as her interfering. However, the current situation was completely different, and she could not interfere in any way, or she would be punished. However, there was something that was disturbing Lilith. She was sure there was no way these zombies could get here so fast. After all, most of them had lost their legs or had been incapacitated after being crushed by the debris of the collapsed buildings during the battle between Bai Zemin and the First Order insect. Suddenly, she looked at a particular place and saw a person running under the storm in the opposite direction of the gymnasium. This person was clearly not part of the group of survivors of Bai Zemin and the rest, or else Lilith would remember it. But she understood that this person was an enemy. Soon, Bai Zemin had taken the lives of the second group of walking corpses almost effortlessly. The only problem was the consumption of mana. Currently, Bai Zemin faced the difficult problem that he did not have good control over his own mana. After all, he had never used or had control over such power. If he wanted to use his mana to perform an all-out attack without caring about the consequences, then there was no problem, since he did not need to worry about mana consumption just as he had done against the First-Order Blazing Beetle. However, if his goal was to make many weak attacks and with less consumption, then the problem appeared. To end the lives of those 15 weak zombies, Baizamen had spent approximately 40 mana points, which was quite considerable since currently his total mana was 204 points. Unfortunately, Baizamen did not seem to be in luck today, as after finishing off that group of 5 zombies, another group of 10 appeared at the entrance and started walking towards him. Some zombies stumbled over the corpses of their own kind and struggled to get back on their feet, while others got stuck in the doorway from trying to enter in a group, blocking the path of entry for those behind them. Baizamen spent a total of 15 mana points to end the lives of those who had successfully entered and left alive those who got stuck at the entrance, blocking the way. Although I can temporarily make use of those weak zombies, if a mutated beast or an evolved zombie appears and lets this endless group of zombies start charging towards here, my little life might be in trouble. Baizamen frowned and felt incredibly frustrated. Lilith, who could only look on without being able to act, was about to give Baizamen something when a playful smile rose on her lips and she slowly said, "Apparently, you're more appreciated than you thought." He looked at her confused and with questioning eyes. However, the answer he was looking for was not from Lilith, but from the outside. The temperature seemed to drop several degrees suddenly, and the already cold atmosphere due to the raging storm became even colder. The sound of zombies growling and bodies falling to the ground one after another could reach Baizamen's ears even with the ongoing storm. After about 5 minutes, the zombies that were stuck were hit by something and their bodies fell limp on the ground to never get up again. On the back of their heads was a small wound the size of a baby's fist, completely frozen by a thin layer of ice. Seeing Shangguan Bingshui dressed in white slowly walk into the building like an ice goddess, Baizamen's expression became a bit complicated. She looked at him silently for several seconds and observed his condition carefully. After almost a minute where the two observed each other with different thoughts, Shangguan Bingshui lightly clenched her pearl-white teeth and took a step forward as if she was fighting against something. Baizamen observed all this in silence. The reason he wasn't afraid that she would want to do something to him was because at the first strange move he could end her life by destroying her from the inside out with his first-order blood manipulation. Even if she was powerful, she definitely couldn't have higher stats than him. However, the facts proved that his precaution was not necessary. He crouched down beside him and without a word supported him to stand up. Baizamen quickly picked up the backpack and the few plastic bags with his healthy hand. He put the backpack on his right shoulder and held the bags with his right hand. With Shangguan Bingshui's help, he slowly stood up, but he had to grit his teeth to the point where his mouth began to bleed from the embracing pain and the uncomfortable itching under his feet. When Shangguan Bingshui moved his left arm around her slender gooseneck to support him, her rain-soaked body shivered slightly and her eyes trembled softly. However, she did not say a word and slowly led him towards the exit. After reaching the outside again, Baizamen was shocked to see over 100 corpses scattered everywhere. All of these zombies had been killed with a clean shot, and their heads only had a small wound that had been frozen with a small layer of ice, preventing the blood from escaping from inside. Obviously, to save Baizamen, Shangguan Bingshui had no choice but to end the lives of this huge group of zombies by herself. However, one thing Baizamen could not understand was why she was alone here and the other two were not. After all, Baizamen knew that she didn't like him. Another thing that was bothering him a bit was why she was here to begin with. After all, the agreement was that he would look for the medicines alone and not join her, Chen He, and Liang Peng's group, so it didn't make much sense for her to show up at this place when she should be waiting in a relatively safe place where the freezing water couldn't reach her. However, the truth was that Shangguan Bing Shui's appearance had gotten Bai Zimin out of a big trouble that in the long run could have cost him his life. However, seeing that she had no intention of speaking, he also said nothing and focused on supporting the pain he felt with every step he took. When they passed by the corpse of the giant first-order blazing beetle, Shangguan Bing Shui hesitated as if she wanted to ask something, but in the end she seemed to be too focused on something else, as her teeth were still clenched tightly. Without saying a word, she continued to move forward. The group of two walked, and the raging storm attacked them mercilessly. Neither of them said anything, as both of them seemed to be fighting for different reasons, and all the willpower they had seemed to be focused on the single goal of moving forward. The only good thing about all this was that fortunately the fog had receded quite a bit thanks to the wild charge of the first-order blazing beetle and its flames, so they could see much better than in the past. Suddenly, a group of 15 zombies rounded a corner and appeared before the group, blocking the way. But Shangguan Bing Shui casually waved her free hand, and 15 ice pikes appeared. As if they had a mind of their own, the 15 ice pikes flew swiftly, and the next second they had appeared before the 15 zombies. The mindless creatures were struck in the head with precision and collapsed lifeless a moment later. The group of two had not even taken 20 steps when a mutated dog of brown fur appeared out of nowhere and charged towards them furiously. The mutated dog's speed was very high, at least 30 or 40 points. A normal person wouldn't even have time to cry out before their throat was ripped to shreds. However, Shangguan Bing Shui said only one word to end its charge: freeze. Following the fall of her cold voice, the mutated dog's body stopped dead in its tracks. Using the water under its feet, the beast's body began to gradually freeze until it became a lifeless ice statue. Seeing this, Bai Zimin could not help but feel a tinge of jealousy. If he had the high mana control that she had, his life would be much simpler, and he wouldn't have to fear losing all his mana after several attacks. However, he was so focused on how powerful and precise her attacks were that he didn't notice how her voice, for the first time since he met her, quivered slightly. She immediately grit her teeth again as if that simple word cost her all her energy, and continued to support him slowly. No matter whether it was Bai Zimin or Shangguan Bing Shui, both of them were soaked from the tips of their hair to the tips of their toes, and if it wasn't because they were both evolved humans with much higher stats than their respective levels, they definitely would have gotten sick as a result. Due to Bai Zimin's injuries, Shangguan Bing Shui had no choice but to move forward at a snail's pace, and by the time the two returned to the gymnasium, it had been a little over an hour since they had left the pharmacy.
The atmosphere inside the building was extremely gloomy. The sound of stifled sobs along with whispers containing words of fear and worry could be heard almost everywhere. Some men were comforting beautiful women and vowing to protect them with their lives, thus gaining the favor of those helpless women who had no one else to trust. However, how could those men who did not have the courage to pick up a weapon to fight defend them? But with the condition the world was in, sometimes even false hope was welcomed with open arms. Among these men was Liang Peng. As one of the few men within this group who not only had the courage to fight, but also possessed the ability to protect others, Liang Peng, who was lustful by nature, was surrounded by a group of 5 female university students.
Liang Pang's appearance was not brilliant, and in fact he was slightly ugly rather than handsome. However, what the naturally weaker women needed was to survive in this new world. This was something they had realized after a day of witnessing their friends dying before their eyes like flies. Chen He could also be surrounded by beauties if he wanted to, even more than Liang Pang. However, he simply stood in a corner as he looked at Liang Pang with a casual glance. Bang! Suddenly, the door opened with a loud bang, drawing everyone's gaze, each of them praying to God or any saint that no more enemies had appeared. At first, when they saw Shangguan Bing Shui and Bai Zemin, they unconsciously let out a sigh of relief. However, after seeing her supporting him and seeing his staggering footsteps, their expressions were filled with disbelief, especially those people who had been saved by him. He was injured? What creature could have been able to injure him to the point of taking away his capacity to move on his own? How could this be possible? The group of surviving students and teachers began to murmur, and their gazes were filled with terror and apprehension. If there was an existence out there capable of causing Bai Zemin, one of the strongest people in this group and one of the few who actually had the courage and the ability to fight, to be left in such a miserable condition where he couldn't even move on his own, then how were they going to survive? Dread and worries about the future overwhelmed their weak minds once again. Liang Pang also had a slight change in his previously smiling expression, and for a moment forgot that he was apparently living the best moment of his life. As for Chen He, he was stunned for different reasons. Seeing Shangguan Bing Shui supporting Bai Zemin, Chen He could not believe what he was seeing, and for a moment even doubted whether his eyes were working properly. "Bing Shui, are you okay?" With eyes wide open and full of disbelief, he asked. "I'm fine." Shangguan Bing Shui's reply was short and cold as usual. As for Bai Zemin, he could not help but look at Chen He as if he were an idiot. The injured person here, who couldn't even move properly, was him, not her. Who was he asking then? But he didn't care too much, and the next second he forgot about it. I won't say thank you, since currently that word is even less valuable than it was in the past. Bai Zemin looked at the beautiful woman beside him, who was once again completely soaked because of him, and said in a deep voice, "Today, it could be said that you got me out of a trouble that could have cost me my life. In the future, I will definitely return the favor to you until I'm even." Without waiting for a response, he gritted his teeth and removed the arm he was using as support on her. Feeling embracing pain under his feet, pain that even freezing water could not alleviate, he began to walk to his place, away from everyone. Every step he took was heavy, and beads of sweat began to form on his forehead, even though his body was cold. Seeing this, it didn't matter if it was Shangguan Bing Shui, Chen He, Liang Pang, or the rest of the survivors. They all realized the pain he was feeling at that moment was too great for words to describe. He seemed to want to say something, but as he looked at Shangguan Bing Shui, he preferred to remain silent. As for Shangguan Bing Shui, she watched his back slowly disappearing at the end of the corridor, and although she really didn't like Bai Zemin, she accepted that at least he was a man with courage and bravery, unlike others. She looked at Liang Pang, and her eyes flashed with disgust, hatred, and disdain as she coldly whispered, "You piece of scum." In fact, the reason why Shangguan Bing Shui was alone when she went to find Bai Zemin was because Chen He had to stay behind to see that Liang Pang didn't do something stupid, since when she invited the two of them to go and find him, Liang Pang was the first to immediately refuse, saying that Bai Zemin had wanted to go out alone on his own. While Liang Pang's words were true, Shangguan Bing Shui had received the highest education in society. Apart from personal talent, she had worked very hard to become what she was today. She, intelligent, could see the bigger picture and knew that Bai Zemin's help would be needed in the long run because regardless of his negative points, he was a good fighter. Therefore, when Liang Peng refused, and upon discovering the almost naked lust in his eyes, Shangguan Bing Shui had no choice but to leave Chen He here to take care of him and prevent him from doing anything stupid. As for why she didn't stay and let Chen He go and find Bai Zemin, it was because even with her self-control, she had no confidence in putting up with the strong man's stupidities and might end up turning him into an ice statue. "Bing Shui, are you really okay?" Now that they were finally a little further away from the rest of the people, Chen He looked at her worriedly and asked, "Huh?" Shangguan Bing Shui did not answer, and as if tired, closed her eyes as she sat down in a corner. Her white dress was completely wet, hugging and outlining the curves of her body, making her even more charming than she naturally already was. Even the gentlemanly and kind Chen He could not help but let his eyes run wild and secretly stole a glance or two before closing his eyes to avoid looking anymore. Countless gazes fell on her and seemed to want to eat her with their eyes, but she had no intention or energy to pay attention to them. She had gotten used to this a long time ago anyway, to the looks of desire, lust. Fuck its mother. Bai Zemin could not help but curse as he gritted his teeth and dropped to the ground like a broken rag without caring about anything but relieving the pressure on his feet. A person could never imagine how horrible the pain of feeling their own skin peeling off and their flesh tearing after being burned by the fire was. Bai Zemin had never in his life experienced such dreadful pain like this, and he never wished to experience it again if possible. "Hey, that's what you get for acting all proud," Lilith teased him mercilessly. Still, she reached over and helped him lean back more comfortably against the wall with careful movements. "Leave me alone." Bai Zemin rolled his eyes and grunted. His chest rose and fell as he took deep breaths, fighting the pain he felt. "I already owe that woman, and I am truly grateful for her help. Whatever her reasons, the fact is that she helped me in my weakest moment, but I do not wish to owe her anything more." "You and that woman have known each other before?" Lilith asked as she sat down beside him. "No. Before the world became this hell, she and I never interacted, and probably never in our lives would have." Bai Zemin closed his eyes and replied quietly, feeling exhausted. "Then why do you seem to be so wary of her?" Lilith had noticed that Bai Zemin kept his distance from everyone. He seemed especially guarded against Shangguan Din Shui. While all the men were enchanted with her in some way or another, Bai Zemin was doing his best to stay away. The more, the better. This was something that had confused him until now, so she decided to ask around to get to know him better, since there seemed to be a backstory. That was the reason why Lilith had thought that they had known each other before. Bai Zemin, exhausted, unconsciously replied, "All of you, women, are not a good bird." "Eh?" Lilith was surprised by his words. She wanted to ask him what he meant, but when she looked at him, she realized that he had already fallen asleep. The pain was so great that Bai Zemin had immediately fallen asleep as soon as he was in a relatively safe place. After all, he was not only in physical pain, his mind was exhausted beyond words, as he had not yet had a proper rest after fighting a battle in which his life was about to end on several occasions. In fact, he was so tired that he didn't even notice what he had said at the end before he fell unconscious. Although it had only been 5 or 6 hours since he had awakened, the battle to the death against the First-Order Blazing Beetle, his first enemy who had actually taken a step on the true path of evolution, Bai Zemin felt as tired as a person who had not slept for 2 days in a row. Therefore, after his exhausted mind and aching body forced him to sleep after reaching a relatively safe place, he was not allowed to wake up until the next day. The world had changed drastically. To say that the previous society had completely collapsed was not an exaggeration in the least, and what all the survivors inside the sports center were hoping for was to get out of this place and get back under the protection of the government and the military. Only then could they feel a little more at ease. None of them knew the situation in which the army equipped with modern weapons was in. The reality was that none of them knew the situation of the outside world. However, for the sake of their own mental health, none of them dared to speak words of despair and even tried not to think of the worst possible situation. When Bai Zemin opened his eyes again, the second day since the beginning of the change had ended and the third day had officially begun. "The rain stopped," he muttered with still slightly sleepy eyes as he concentrated on the noise outside. The sound of thunder, the illumination of lightning flashing between the small cracks in the window that the timbers could not cover, as well as the fierce sound of water lashing the world as if it were a punishment from the heavens, it had all stopped. A few hours ago the storm stopped. The reason behind the strange weather in this world was because the sleeping Mana could sense the approach of the soul record. Now that the soul record has finally reached this world, things will slowly return to normal. A soft, charming, playful, but also kind voice sounded a few meters from him. Looking to his left, Bai Zemin saw an extremely beautiful woman sitting elegantly on a table next to the window that was now no longer being covered by a block of wood. The few rays of sunlight that slipped through the clouds surrounded her, creating a great contrast with her black hair and her dark-as-night dress. Without a doubt, this was one of the most beautiful scenes he had ever seen in his entire life. "Angel?" he muttered, still half asleep, as he couldn't help but mutter. "I'm not an angel, I'm a demon." Lilith gave him the most beautiful smile he had ever seen in all his life. "Good morning." Although her smile was beautiful, to Bai Zemin it was extremely dangerous. As if he had received an electric shock, he flinched and looked away as he responded, "Good morning to you too." Lilith's eyes had a strange hint flashing within them. She blinked for a few seconds before shaking her head as if dismissing an idea. "How about your body?" she asked as she approached him with soft steps like a spring breeze. "Now that you mention it," Bai Zemin ignored her as she sat down next to him. He inspected his condition and was pleasantly surprised to find that the wrenching pain he felt yesterday was at least half gone. Although still painful, it was no longer unbearable for him. But what was most surprising was that after the flesh burned by the beetle's flames fell off, new flesh had begun to grow and skin was slowly forming on the less affected parts. What is all this about?" Bai Zemin was dumbfounded. "Didn't I tell you already?" Lilith didn't know whether to laugh or cry seeing his expression. "Your health is currently several times higher than that of a normal person. If it used to take a person 3 or 4 months to recover from such injuries, you can do it 10 times faster." In fact, with the 90 health points he currently had, his recovery speed was approximately 9 times faster than a normal person with no evolution. Cell reproduction, repair of damaged cells, and regeneration of new tissue, everything was much faster. "At this speed, I only need a couple more days to fully recover." Bai Zemin felt excited and let out a complicated sigh. He felt happy since by recovering quickly he would finally not have to fear. After all, if another monster similar to the first-order blazing beetle appeared, with his current physical condition, only death would await him. However, in the midst of that happiness, there was a complex emotion as he had finally realized that nothing would be like before. Bai Zemin shook his head softly and looked at Lilith as he stretched his arms. She raised an eyebrow and teased, "You want me to hug you?" He rolled his eyes and replied, "Give me my damn orbs already." "How do you know?" She looked at him with wide eyes. "Even though I had fallen unconscious at that moment, I know that you won't let go of anything that could help me grow, right?" You really have no good sense of humor." She clicked her tongue and scolded him while pouting cutely. However, the glint in her eyes was of mirth, as the smarter he was, the greater the odds of surviving and becoming more powerful. "Here, I'll give them back to you, boring man." She waved her hand and 3 objects floated towards him before falling gently on his lap. Bai Zemin looked at her with jealousy. He too wanted to wave his hand and make things float easily, but it didn't seem to be something that would happen any time soon. "Where did you get this?" he asked as he looked at her in confusion. She stretched out her right hand gracefully, and without needing to say anything, Bai Zimin's gaze was drawn to a beautiful gold-colored ring with silver runes similar to a wedding ring, like the ones Earth people wore. "You're engaged?" he teased. "Idiot." She rolled her eyes charmingly and replied, "This is a space storage ring. Inside there's a big space where I can save my stuff." "Just like in the novels," Bai Zimin nodded with understanding. "How can I have one of those?" How could he not want one? After all, with a ring like Lilith's, he wouldn't need to carry a backpack everywhere, and his general life would become much simpler in this world. "If you want one with a large spatial size like this, then forget it." Lilith softly shook her head as she casually said, "This is a legend-grade treasure. Even for you, it's impossible to acquire something of that level yet." Oh, Bai Zimin couldn't help but be slightly discouraged. Forget legend treasures, he had yet to even see a magic-grade treasure, and his two strongest and most precious items were only rare-grade. "But," seeing him depressed, Lilith continued, "if you're lucky, you might be able to get one of lesser quality. You can also get a green orb, and maybe, just maybe, if your luck is really high, maybe you can get one." "Forget it. I'll make do with what I have for now." Bai Zimin no longer entertained the matter of the ring. Such things seemed too far away from someone like him yet. Turning his attention to the objects in his lap, Bai Zimin's eyes lit up with delight, and all the previous bad thoughts completely disappeared without a trace. The First Order blazing beetle had dropped 3 objects, 2 orbs and 1 skill scroll. One of those orbs was orange in color, representing a rare treasure. Surprisingly, the other orb was deep yellow in color. In other words, Bai Zimin had before him an orb that contained a magic-grade treasure. This was his first magic-grade treasure. Although he had just heard something incredible like legend-grade treasures, he had not been discouraged at all, since after seeing how precious his Zwanir sword and full coat were, he was definitely looking forward to seeing what this orb before him contained. Before seeing the contents of the orb, Bai Zimin felt mischievous and anxious, as if he were a small child about to open his Christmas present. However, he fought the desire and turned his attention first to the orange orb. "Let's save the best for last." "You're acting like a child, you know that, don't you?" "Don't distract me." In the midst of light conversation, as if the outside world was still peaceful and as if the danger of death did not lurk around every corner, Bai Zimin squeezed the orange orb with a bit of strength, and after a flash of light, a new object appeared before him. Honestly, what Bai Zimin was looking forward to was another pair of boots that could replace his previous boots that were destroyed by the flames of the First Order blazing beetle. Unfortunately, things didn't always turn out as one expected. Blazing Ring, rare treasure. A ring that contains the power of burning fire within it. When equipped, magic plus 10 points. Once per day, it can release a flare of fire that can be used to attack or defend. Seeing the deep red ring, Bai Zimin's face turned a little strange. He looked at the beautiful woman a short distance away and slowly asked, "Miss Demon Race, what is this all about?" What do you mean?" Lilith blinked at him and looked at him blankly. "What do you mean by what do you mean?" Bai Zimin didn't know if she was playing innocent or really didn't understand, therefore he asked patiently, "Why would a rare orb possess a treasure with magic like this ring?" "Huh? Who said that objects with magic could only come out of magic-grade orbs?" Lilith looked at him with amusement and softly explained, "While it's true that the chances are low, from rare-grade treasure onwards, objects like the ring in your hands can appear. It's similar to the case of my space storage ring. Even an epic treasure can contain one, but its grade will be much lower." The corner of Bai Zimin's mouth twitched severely upon hearing her explanation, and this time it wasn't because of pain. In fact, he had assumed that magic-grade treasures meant objects capable of releasing magic spells. However, he had apparently misunderstood the name of the ranks, attributing those names to the contents of the orbs. With a much more open mind and much more expectant than before, Bai Zemin turned to the deep yellow orb and crushed it. A bronze-colored light flashed, forcing him to close his eyes for a second. When he felt that the brightness had disappeared, Bai Zemin opened his eyes expectantly and looked at the object in his lap. However, when he saw the appearance of the object, his expression turned a little ugly. A bronze-colored pocket bell lay in his lap. This bell was dented in several places, and there was even a part that had been forcibly torn off or had fallen off due to how old it was. Basically, it looked exactly like a useless bell. However, even though the appearance was extremely ugly, Bai Zemin was never one to judge a book by its cover. Although his expression was not very good, his hopes had not been dashed in the slightest, and he picked up the object to inspect it. Broken bronze bell, magic treasure, an ancient bell that was broken and whose current defensive power is practically non-existent. When worn, it automatically increases magic power and mana by 20 points. Once per day, it can release a shield of fire that can be used to attack or defend. Bai Zemin's expression was a bit erratic and difficult to describe. On one hand, he felt happy, but on the other, he felt confused. Practically non-existent defensive power. Well, just by looking at the appearance of the bronze bell, he didn't expect much, but that description... Forget it. 20 magic points and 20 mana points is great. He spoke aloud to himself, as if to lift his own mood. Curious, Lilith picked up the broken bell and green letters flashed in her retina with the object's information. She handed it back to Bai Zemin and assured him, although this bell is broken and its description says that its defensive power is almost non-existent, in reality it is probably the best treasure you could ever possibly obtain. Oh? His ears twitched gently, and his interest piqued. He looked at her with sparkling eyes, waiting for her next words. While the defensive power of this item might not be as strong against evolved beings, against other humans, it will be your best ally. Lilith smiled, her eyes glittering strangely. Currently, this world is not especially advanced in technology like other worlds. Therefore, it is likely that... Forget it, you'll see for yourself when the time comes. Although she had not finished her words, Bai Zemin felt that he understood what she meant. His mood lifted again, and he carefully put away the broken bronze bell in the pocket of his full coat. His life had now acquired another layer of protection, which in this world is more than appreciated. Finally, let's see what this is. Bai Zemin picked up the skill scroll, and the information immediately appeared. Elephant Skin, unclassified passive skill, level 5, increases stamina by 50 points. To say he wasn't a bit disappointed would be a lie, considering he was expecting a much stronger skill. However, 50 stamina points was a huge amount of boost to his strength. Even after all these battles and all these upgrades, Bai Zemin's stamina was only 75 points, not counting the extra 5 from his full coat. And since it was a passive skill and did not take up space among the few available ones he possessed to learn active skills, this skill was welcome. With a thought, the skill scroll disappeared and several gray particles of light entered his body. Deep within his soul, a dull gray rune formed, and Bai Zemin felt his entire body suddenly become much harder and tougher than in the past. However, before he could think of anything else, several green letters flashed across his retina. Evolution requirements fulfilled. Do you wish to evolve Elephant Skin skill to the next level? This? Whoa! Bai Zemin was dumbfounded. What happened? He hadn't even done anything, and it hadn't even been 2 seconds since he learned the skill, but it could already be evolved to the next level. Lilith, looks like I can evolve a skill, he said in a weird tone. You probably fulfilled some relatively easy requirement. Lilith wasn't sure either. Focus on that skill and look at the evolution requirement to confirm it. Bai Zemin nodded and quickly looked at his newly acquired skill. Elephant Skin, unclassified passive skill, level 5. This skill is at its maximum level and can evolve to the next level if the following requirements are met.
Stamina stat above 100 points naturally, without external support. 125 over 100. Requirements met. Do you wish to evolve elephant skin skill to the next level? Apparently each skill had different difficulties to evolve. At least for Bai Zemin, it didn't seem difficult at all to reach 100 points in a stat. However, when he told Lilith the evolution requirement, she didn't know whether to laugh or cry when she said, "You little brat, do you think it's easy for a person of your level to reach and surpass 100 points in stats? While there have been more people who have achieved that, there aren't many. Besides, you're the first living creature I know in the universe's history who is able to evolve a skill so fast." Bai Zemin felt happy at her words, but he did not let that happiness go to his head. While he might be the first to evolve a skill so fast according to Lilith's knowledge, it was just an unclassified passive skill, so Bai Zemin did not believe that his act was something incredible. Of course, Bai Zemin had no idea that Lilith was comparing him to monsters like the God of the Bible that Christians worshipped, or else his thoughts would not be so simple.
The real reason why Bai Zemin did not feel that such an achievement was a big deal was mainly because he was only evolving an unclassified to first-order skill. It was not as if he was evolving a particularly powerful skill by any stretch of the imagination. Furthermore, while it was true that Bai Zemin's stamina had reached 125 natural points without external support, the reality was that almost half of those points came from the elephant skin skill itself. Of course, even with all the aforementioned, the fact that he could achieve so many stamina enhancements in just over 2 days was the real achievement. Lilith had never met or heard of another existence capable of improving so quickly. With a single thought, the elephant skin skill began to evolve. The dull gray rune that was engraved deep within Bai Zemin's soul lit up. Countless flashes of lightning flickered from deep within him, and his entire body began to heat up as a strange ticklish-like, but not so unbearable feeling was transmitted through every millimeter of his skin. After several minutes, the lightning flashing inside his body receded and was absorbed by the rune from which it came before. However, the once dull gray rune had now become a deep bronze rune. Elephant skin, unclassified passive skill, level 5, to bronze skin, first order passive skill, level 1. Bronze skin, first order passive skill, level 1. Your skin becomes much tougher than that of any living being on Earth before the awakening of mana. Increases stamina 100 points. Bai Zemin was grinning from ear to ear as he looked at his 180 total stamina points. He could feel practically unlimited energy from his body, and the feeling of becoming stronger once again excited him to the point of forgetting about his injuries. "You should be careful now that you have such monstrous stamina," Lilith said out of nowhere, dragging Bai Zemin out of his daydream. "What? Why?" He looked at her with some alarm. Could it be that there was really something bad? Maybe it was because his stats were a little off balance. After all, Bai Zemin's stamina stat was his current highest physical stat, and by a wide margin. Maybe the body needed to balance itself somehow? Lilith looked at him with a serious expression and slowly said, "Well, your current stamina is almost 20 times higher than that of a normal man and woman. Imagine what would happen if you suddenly decided to unleash your libido wildly on a woman's body. The poor girl would probably be devastated." ... Bai Zemin's face rotted when he heard her words. She thought he was a sex machine or something like that? With his face as black as coal, Bai Zemin gritted his teeth and bellowed, "I swear I'll kick your ass someday." Seeing him gritting his teeth and looking at her as if he wanted to bite her to death, Lilith felt so amused that she started to laugh out loud. This was the first time she thought that a lower existence was so interesting. 3 days later, the 6th day since the mana was awakened by the soul record. During these 3 days, Bai Zemin did not leave the cafeteria and closed the door firmly, isolating himself from the rest of the people. Except for eating and drinking, Bai Zimin's only entertainment was chatting with the beautiful and charming succubus Lilith. Fortunately, due to constant evolutions, his digestive system was no longer as problematic as that of a normal person. In this time, he focused on recovering from his injuries without doing anything else. In addition, to avoid any kind of trouble, Bai Zimin had talked with Chen He and asked him to take all the food out of the cafeteria, leaving only what he needed for himself and a bit for emergencies. This way, he didn't have to be in contact with people he didn't know and didn't trust while he was still injured. Bai Zimin stood up and stomped on the ground several times as if checking something. The wounds on my feet and legs healed completely," he nodded in satisfaction and relief. Now, even if a second monster similar to the First Order blazing beetle appeared, he was confident that at least his chances of victory weren't practically non-existent like when he was injured and unable to move. The only problem was that his left wrist was still broken. However, he only needed to use his right hand to wield the Shuangyuan sword, so he was temporarily fine. Bai Zimin estimated that he would need at least another 7 days for his bones to fully recover. However, 7 days was quite a long time, and his strength would be affected as a result of not being able to use both hands at the same time. This result was already good enough considering that in normal cases, a person would need 2 to 3 months to recover from a bone fracture. "Let's see how things are going outside. Besides, I have a debt to pay." His eyes flashed coldly as he opened the cafeteria door for the first time in 3 days. "When you act mad, you look hot," Lilith said, as beautiful and charming as ever, walking behind him as if he was his shadow. Unlike 3 days ago, the mood inside the gymnasium had not improved in any way. On the contrary, the hope of many students and teachers began to flicker. The cold and fever medicines that Bai Zimin had obtained from the pharmacy had already been distributed by Shangguan Bingshe and the help of other teachers. Therefore, those who were sick had improved a lot, and those who were about to get sick were able to avoid illness successfully. Each one of the survivors had been well fed, and while it was true that the food was no longer as luxurious or extravagant as in the past, at least all of them were able to have 3 meals a day without fail. However, even under such conditions, times more luxurious than that of who knows how many people who at the moment could only hide in some dark corner without food, the hope of all the survivors in the gymnasium was shaken. The reason, they, who were waiting for the arrival of the military army, or at the very least the support of the police forces, had not even heard the sound of a siren. In the gymnasium, there was also a big screen, but there was no news and all the channels were dead. As for the radio, it had also collapsed, as did the phone signal. Bai Zimin caught the erratic eyes of the people, and when they saw him appear walking, some sighed of relief that the group's strength was rising, while others had no apparent reaction. However, the most surprised of them was Shangguan Bingshe. She looked at him, and her beautiful blue eyes had a strange glint in them. "Are your wounds okay now?" she asked, with clear surprise in her usually indifferent voice. This shocked Chen He to the marrow of his bones, and his eyes widened in astonishment. She was worried about him? But how could such a thing be possible? Didn't they just meet? Didn't they dislike each other? Chen He's head was full of unanswered questions. While the handsome Chen He looked at Shangguan Bingshe with surprise and Bai Zimin with caution, he actually didn't know that the reason she asked that question was not because she cared about him, it was because she had seen how severe the burns on his feet were. With such dreadful burns, Shangguan Bingshe had figured that it would at least take him 2 months to walk completely naturally again. After all, Bai Zimin's level was obviously not low. If he had not said anything and she had not asked, Shangguan Bingshe was almost 100% sure that that 3-meter-tall beetle was killed by him. A person capable of killing such a hideous monster couldn't have a low level. However, what Shangguan Bingshe did not expect was that only 4 days later, Bai Zimin would appear again as if his previous wounds had never existed. What kind of immortal monster was this?
"My wounds are fine now, thank you for asking." Bai Zimin took a moment to look at the faces of the people in front of him before looking at Shangguan Bingshe and replying.
Hearing that he was indeed fine and confirming it through his natural voice, Shangguan Bingshui's eyes had a strange glint in them after confirming that his wounds had effectively healed. "I see." She only nodded before looking at Chen He silently. The talented archer understood the intention behind her gaze and slowly began to explain to Bai Zemin the situation. "During the past 3 days when you were recovering, the condition of the sick due to the low temperatures of their bodies improved with the help of the general califaction. Thank you for that." He honestly thanked on behalf of the rest of the survivors. Soon, however, he frowned and continued, "But there is another problem at present." Bai Zemin was not surprised. He nodded slightly and finished his words instead. "The food is running low, isn't it?" "That's right." Chen He sighed and scratched his head in frustration. "Currently, because we didn't want to make the situation any worse than it already is, we let everyone eat their fill. The problem is that now the reserved food finally ran out. We can only last until tomorrow." Liang Peng, who had been silent with his big hammer, interrupted. "Then why don't we just go get some more? Those zombies are slow as hell, and those dogs and cats may be fast, but they're too dumb. I don't think we'll have a problem if we all move together." "In fact, I'm afraid we have no choice but to go out and forage for food at the university restaurants." Chen He had no choice but to say yes. Food was an indispensable resource that could not be missed. Even the strongest evolvers had no choice but to eat to provide nutrients that the body needed but did not produce naturally. Without food, everyone would weaken to the point where lifting a single finger would be a challenge. Moreover, the chaos resulting from starvation was something no one was willing to let happen. Besides, Chai Jingyi, the same girl who had met Bai Zemin at the beginning of the apocalypse, suddenly seemed to gather the courage to speak. Although she felt a little self-conscious under everyone's gaze, she continued, "Actually, since there are male and female changing rooms for showering, hygiene is not much of a problem. However, after almost a week of wearing the same clothes, it is starting to become a bit unbearable." "We will definitely get more clothes." Shangguan Bingshui was the first to agree as she frowned slightly. Although her clothes were free of dirt stains and her white dress along with her silver hair made her look like an angel, the truth was that after not being able to change even once in 6 days, her mood was not the best. The corner of Bai Zemin's mouth twitched a couple of times, but he said nothing. Even he did not feel comfortable with the current situation, not to mention the women who, by nature, were beings who constantly worried about cleanliness. Seeing that no one disagreed with her words, Chai Jingyi couldn't help but sigh of relief. By the way, taking advantage of the momentary silence, Bai Zemin looked at Chen He and casually asked, "The army, the government, the police forces, no word on this?" Hearing his question, Liang Peng, Chai Jingyi, and the few teachers present looked at Chen He, waiting for his answer. "Nothing." Chen He shook his head to no one's surprise. But a bespectacled teacher interrupted with an anxious expression. "Young Master Chen, your Chen family is a big family with power in the army, and your father a regimental commander. Shouldn't they send someone for you at least?" Bai Zemin couldn't help but raise an eyebrow. Family with military backing? Regimental commander? He hadn't expected Chen He to have such a background. To think that this handsome guy's father was actually a veteran soldier with military rank colonel. Bai Zemin had a strange glint, and his gaze could not help but shift slightly towards Shangguan Bingshui. Then her background should be similar or superior to Chen He's. Chen He's face changed slightly, but soon returned to normal. He looked at Shangguan Bingshui for a moment before sighing. "Indeed, I was hoping that my family would get here soon, but apparently the situation is far worse than we all thought." "How can that be possible?" The teacher who had spoken earlier looked desperate, and his face lost all color. If even an important person like Chen He was practically abandoned by his own family, how could they, people with no real backing, expect support from the government or the army? It was nothing but wishful thinking. They all looked desperate for a moment. The only two people whose expression remained unchanged were the indifferent Shangguan Bingshui and Liang Peng, who was casually looking around. Even Bai Zemin's expression turned a bit ugly, not because of the lack of military or governmental response, but because of his family. The worse the situation was outside, the less likely it was that his family would survive amidst such chaos. They have to be okay. No matter what, definitely nothing could happen to them. Bai Zemin clenched his fists, ignoring the pain in his left hand. Every time he thought about his family, his heart squeezed hard like a giant stone was pressing on it. However, no matter how much he wanted to see them and run out to find them, he couldn't do that. As strong as he was, Bai Zemin did not know what kind of dangers dwelt outside this place, and he was not arrogant enough to believe that his strength was enough to overcome them all. "Then let's go find the food we can get," Bai Zemin said coldly. His tone of voice lacked emotion, and his indifferent voice seemed to have a higher weight than in the past. While Bai Zemin was indifferent, his indifference contained several degrees of coldness that was not there before. "What do you mean?" Shangguan Bingshui frowned her brows slightly, also secretly surprised by the abrupt change. Bai Zemin looked at her and slowly explained, "From now on, those who are unwilling to help in any way will only be able to eat enough to not starve. To be honest, I have no time to waste with leeches here. If no one is willing to move to advance and get out of this damned hellhole, then I will start moving on my own with people who really want to get out of this hellhole." Lilith, who was visible only to Bai Zemin, stood silently beside him. When she heard his words, her eyes glittered, and a silent smile rose on her lips. From a certain point of view, it could be said that this was the first major change in Bai Zemin after the world had changed. He had already saved many people out of kindness, but if they wanted to keep him using that kindness, then he would abandon them without even a second thought. To him, his family was everything. As long as he had that impulse, then he would not be held back by anything. Lilith's only worry was that if Bai Zemin's family did not survive, it was probable that he would not be able to rally a motive to fight for. Therefore, she had to think of countermeasures. No matter what, she could not just let him fall in this place. Wait a minute." Liang Peng raised his voice and looked at Bai Zemin with wide eyes. "Are you crazy?" Bai Zemin casually looked him up and down before looking him in the eyes and asking coldly, "And you are what?" "My previous words were not a question. What I said is what will happen. Whether you like it or not, you don't have a choice."
Bai Zemin's words stunned everyone present. Regardless of whether they were teachers or students, the people able to participate in this small meeting and express their opinions stared straight ahead with blank expressions. Shangguan Bingshui frowned and suddenly felt that there was something wrong with this situation. Her brain was like a supercomputer, remembering what had just happened, and soon her eyes flashed softly as if she had finally understood everything. Chen He, who always had a calm expression on his face, could not help but gasp in a breath of cold air as he looked at Bai Zemin as if he was an unidentified alien. Until now, although the time they spent together was not much, Chen He had identified Bai Zemin as a person who enjoyed loneliness more than the company of others and was usually quite calm. Therefore, now that he saw him go crazy and say such arrogant words, he did not know how to react. Moreover, Chen He had seen how terrifying Liang Peng's strength was during the first day of the apocalypse after the arrival of the soul record to this world. A single blow from his hammer was enough to turn a zombie's body into a pile of meat paste. "What arrogance, brat!" Liang Peng's eyes opened as wide as those of an enraged bull. His beard quivered, and he looked at Bai Zemin as if he was going to jump on him at any moment. Bai Zemin's eyes flashed with a hint of coldness as he looked at the man who was like a small giant. His current mood was gloomy, to say the least. As if that wasn't enough, his left hand was still hurting. His family might be suffering from hunger or who knows what kind of hardship.
Since this person does not understand in a good way, and words could not reach him, a bit of pain might make him understand the meaning of the word terror. Bai Zemin took a step forward and was about to make his move when a cold but beautiful voice stopped him. "Okay, let's do as you say." Everyone looked at Shangguan Bingshui in surprise and disbelief. Even Bai Zemin himself was surprised that this woman agreed with his words so easily and without argument. "Bingshui, are you sure of what you were saying?" Chen He looked at his childhood friend in shock. It was no secret to anyone that he had been in love with her for years. Therefore, he knew very well that she was an intelligent woman. However, he did not understand why she had accepted such an idea that was clearly not good at the moment. Shangguan Bingshui gently shook her head but did not explain anything. Among those present, only she had noticed that Bai Zemin's mood was on the floor, and if it wasn't for her interrupting just in time, it was likely that things would have gotten out of hand. Right now, the last thing they needed were internal battles. "While I agree with what you said, I need you to explain better what you have in mind, otherwise no one will accept such a wild idea like that." Shangguan Bingshui looked at Bai Zemin indifferently and slowly explained. "At this point, everyone's mood is not good. The situation of the unknown world is getting worse and worse. If we suddenly tell them that their meals will be cut off, no one will accept it willingly." Bai Zemin looked at her and took a deep breath to calm himself a bit before speaking slowly. "Of course, what I want is not for everyone to suddenly have the courage to fight. I know something like that is illogical." Noticing that things had calmed down, the teachers present, Chai Jingyi and Chen He, secretly let out a sigh of relief. As for Liang Peng, he only snorted and remained silent as he listened to what Bai Zemin had to say about it. Shangguan Bingshui nodded and indicated with her eyes for him to continue explaining his idea. If Bai Zemin had asked everyone to fight in order to eat, then even if the strength of the group fell, she would have no choice but to ask him to left alone. After all, very few people were willing to risk their lives, and the human mentality had not yet completely changed to adapt to the new world. Bai Zemin continued, "My idea is simple. After we find food, the students and teachers who are unable to fight will carry it. In addition, when we look for clothes or other useful items, these people will also help. I also think it would be good to get some beds. In short, whatever is logistical support and does not require risking life and death, all those who want to eat their fill should cooperate." After a moment of silence, the handsome Chen He was the first to open his mouth, saying, "I agree, that idea is good enough." "I agree as well." Shangguan Bingshui finally nodded in perfect accord. In the end, everyone accepted Bai Zemin's suggestion. While some of them might not be satisfied, 3 of the 4 fighters in the group had already made up their minds, so those without fighting ability could only accept their fate. When the new rules were announced, many people complained loudly, and some of them even began to curse. But when Bai Zemin said that those who disagree and all those who continued to make a fuss should leave the group, all the courage of these people disappeared completely, and no one else was willing to complain for fear to be kicked out of the group. What a joke! As weak as they were, being expelled from the group and the protection of those with real power was no different than courting death. Bai Zemin looked at the more than 100 people present, and an idea flashed in his mind. It was a bit annoying, but in the long run, it might be his best help in finding his loved ones. With this in mind, he stepped forward and said aloud, "I know many of you are afraid of being scratched by those zombies, since most of you here probably have seen the aftermath. But you don't need to be so scared. Those zombies are even slower than a normal person like you, so imagine how slow they are for people like me and everyone else who have leveled up by absorbing the enemy's soul power." The eyes of several people had a strange glint in them upon hearing this. Indeed, zombies were slow, and if one was careful, even a normal person could kill a zombie. However, it was not easy to overcome the fear, let alone knowing that zombies were not the only danger. But Bai Zemin's next words changed things. "I will personally hunt zombies. cut off their legs and arms, even crush their jaws. You just need to have the courage to pick up a weapon and finish them off to gain soul power and level up. People began to murmur and stare at each other as they argued amongst themselves. Clearly, there were many tempted by the offer. After all, without their hands, legs, and without their teeth, the zombies were nothing to fear. None of them were really willing to die, and there were many of them who didn't want to do more embarrassing jobs for fear of fighting. However, at the end of the day, fear was one of the strongest human emotions. After a minute, no one stood up, and everyone was silent. While Baizamin's words were tempting, no one was willing to risk their life just like that. Even if the zombies were incapacitated by him, there were still terrifying insects and other horrible beasts that could emerge from anywhere at any time. Asking them to pick up a weapon to fight after living almost 20 years or more in a peaceful society under the protection of rules, laws, and their parents was no different than asking them to walk naked down the street in broad daylight. It might sound easy, but no one in their right mind was willing to do something like that. Unfortunately, by the time many of them realized this fact, it would be too late to regret it. Liang Pang folded his arms and looked at the scene with a mocking expression. Chen He was casual, unconcerned about what was happening in front of him. Shangguan Bing Shui had a strange glint in her eyes and looked at the women present, seemingly thinking about something. Since you are unwilling, then you can continue to be trash for the rest of your lives. Baizamin looked at the crowd coldly and snorted. However, just when he was about to turn around and leave, a soft voice took him by surprise. "I'll go with you." Baizamin looked to the side and saw the pretty but normally shy and fearful Cai Jingyi looking at him with a serious expression. She gritted her teeth softly and continued, "Please let me go with you to kill zombies." Cai Jingyi was a smart woman and knew that although they were currently being protected, if a problem that Shangguan Bing Shui, Chen He, Liang Pang, or Baizamin could not solve, just by having the strength of her own, her chances of surviving in this world would be higher. Otherwise, it was only a matter of time before she would die for some reason or another. When a rock fell on a silent lake, waves always appeared, no matter how small they were. "Let me come with you. I want to kill zombies too." A young man around 19 years old, wearing glasses, and whose body was thin, stood up and took a step forward. "I also want to level up. Let me go with you, please." Another young man in his 20s stood up and looked at Baizamin with determination. "I'll go with you." A pretty female student with some freckles also stood up while gritting her teeth. Although her body shivered with fear, she still decided to step forward. "Only 4 of them, huh? It will do for now," Baizamin thought silently, and a smile raised softly on his face as his eye scanned the 4 people who had the courage to step forward. Sometimes human beings just needed a little push to dare to do things they normally would have never thought to do. There are even 2 women here who had the courage to stand up, but you who call yourselves men don't have the courage to take a step forward? Baizamin looked at the male students and even the male teachers with undisguised disdain. Hearing his words, all the men on the scene who did not dare to step forward blushed so much that it seemed like all the blood in their bodies had rushed up to their heads. However, none of them dared to look him back, and, of course, none of them dared to step forward. On the other hand, the 2 male students who had the courage to step forward could not help but straighten their backs a little more. Even the glasses-wearing and slightly skinny student had more courage than men with bulky bodies. Baizamin no longer wasted his time with these people. They themselves would soon regret the opportunity they had just missed. "Is it all right with you guys if we go out to look for food now?" Baizamin looked at the other 3 leaders and asked. "Fine with me." Chen Han nodded and picked up his bow as he looked at the woman beside him. Shangguan Bing Shui simply stood up and walked toward the exit without saying anything. As for Liang Pang, he just snorted as he picked up his hammer and followed the other 2 without saying a word, clearly still upset about what had happened earlier. Bai Zemin looked at the 4 people who decided to follow him and slowly said, "You 4 follow me. You don't need to carry anything, but you should mentally prepare yourselves for what's coming." The 4 nodded quickly, indicating that they understood. Seeing this, Bai Zemin turned around and walked out with the 4 students behind him. "Everyone, please follow closely behind President Shangguan's group and the rest. I hope we all contribute a little bit of each other to improve everyone's lives." Teacher Jia clapped her hands and tried to raise everyone's spirits. As the group led by Bai Zemin, Chen He, Shangguan Bing Shui, and Liang Peng walked slowly and with looks full of precaution as they escorted over 20 male and female students. Taking out over 100 people and protecting them all was an incredibly difficult task to accomplish. After all, unknown dangers lurked around every corner, and slow zombies were the least of the worries of people who had been absorbing the enemy soul power and constantly leveling up. But the danger of high-level mutated animals or evolved insects was much higher and was something that even they dared not take easily. Therefore, to prevent unnecessary losses and to make the job simpler for themselves, the 4 of them had decided to bring a few more than 20 people to carry the food on this occasion. Of course, the pretty and shy freshman Kai Jing-yi had registered all the people who were willing to go out and work but did not have the opportunity this time. These people could eat freely and would be mobilized in the near future. As for those who were not willing to work, they could only eat what was necessary to not starve. The world had changed, and the old rules no longer applied. Slowly but surely, there would be necessary changes that would be implemented over time. This was only the first of many more to come. The 4 evolved people were divided into 4 parts, each protecting one side of the rhombus in which the more than 20 people were enclosed. Liang Peng, whose strength was monstrous, was in charge of the front. When the zombies approached, he would charge forward and needed only a swing of his hammer to turn that zombie into a bloody mess. Although his hunting method scared many students, the reality was that it worked well. Shangguan Bing Shui, whose ability to control ice and move it at will was incredibly strong, was in charge of protecting the right of the diamond. Anytime a zombie came too close, an ice spike would appear over its head and pierce its brain silently. Shangguan Bing Shui's hunting method was extremely beautiful. Not even a drop of blood fell to the ground, and the ice fragments floating in the air were extremely charming. Not even a single zombie managed to show any signs of breaking through her defenses. Chen He, who was at the back of the group, was probably the most relaxed person at the moment. His right hand was holding an arrow, and his left hand was tightly gripping his bow. When a zombie escaped from Liang Peng's range due to his normal speed, Chen He casually shot an arrow, and the walking corpse fell to the ground with a wound on its forehead. Bai Zemin, who was in charge of protecting the left side of the group, silently looked on as a zombie slowly crawled out of a building, dragging its feet, and approached towards the group. "They really are slow," he couldn't help but shake his head softly. After so many upgrades to his agility stat, zombies were like moving turtles from his point of view. However, although to Bai Zemin they were slow and not much of a challenge, from the point of view of the other survivors, they were extremely terrifying creatures. When they saw the zombie's dead eyes and the amount of bloody wounds on its body, as well as its yellowish teeth full of human flesh or anything else stuck in between, it didn't matter if it was male or female, they all shuddered in terror. Many of them even began to sob silently. In fact, the sound that could be heard most in the group was the restrained cries of the people. They who had been living safely for 6 days without having to see such creatures were again forced to remember that the present world was no longer the world they knew. "Who wants to go first?" Bai Zemin looked at Kai Jing-yi and the other 3 students as he spoke in a deep voice. "I'll hunt them down for you. You just need to give them the final strike and enjoy the benefits. Easy. Don't let me be disappointed. Opportunities like this won't always come." Although the 4 of them gathered the courage to move forward at that time, when facing the zombie face to face, it was natural to feel fear. Therefore, after several seconds, none of them spoke. Just as Bai Zemin's face was beginning to turn ugly, one of the students slowly raised his hand and in a trembling voice asked, Let me do it first." It was a bit of a surprise for Bai Zemin to see that the first person was actually the thin student with glasses. This guy was average in every aspect, and his body was even weaker than a normal young adult without evolving through soul power absorption. However, his courage was commendable. "What's your name?" Bai Zemin looked at him for a moment and asked. "It's Fu Shekfeng," the glasses-wearing student quickly announced, his eyes looking at the zombie that was slowly but surely approaching, and though his weak body quivered in fear, he took a step forward and asked in a low voice, "Big Brother Bai, and wonder if I can ask you something." "Oh," Bai Zemin narrowed his eyes. He was already doing everything he possibly could, but this person wanted more. However, he didn't immediately burst out and asked slowly, "Tell me, what is it about?" Fu Shekfeng took a deep breath and while looking at the zombie said words that surprised Bai Zemin. "I hope you will lend me your sword and let me kill that zombie with my own hands. No help, just me." Although his voice was quite low, the group was not big, therefore many heard his request. Most looked at him in shock and disbelief. Others looked at him with indifference, and others looked at him with pity as if they were already looking at a dead man. "You're as thin as a bamboo pole, but you want to show off?" Many of the men who had been mocked by Bai Zemin's words felt that they could finally vent the bad smell and secretly sneered. "Okay, since you have so much resolve and courage, you can do it all by yourself." Bai Zemin's eyes flashed strangely, and without another word he handed the sword to Fu Shekfeng silently. "This, incredible!" Fu Shekfeng immediately felt the huge boost of strength rushing through his body after the sword wrung by strange runes touched his hands. He who was always considered the weakest, at this moment felt that he could break the bones of even the strongest student. Under the surprised and scared gaze of many, Fu Shekfeng took a deep breath and while observing the zombie less than 10 meters away, he tightened his grip on the wielding hilt of the sword. Although his strength stat had gone up dramatically thanks to the treasure in his hands, all of his remaining stats were even below average and average at best. Besides, the fact that one scratch was all he needed to receive for his life to be over was something he knew perfectly well. Nevertheless, Fu Shekfeng gritted his teeth until his lingual gums bled before stepping forward. Bai Zemin watched all this with flashing eyes. He was going to give the sword to the 4 students after hunting the zombies, but Fu Shekfeng's request was something he did not expect.
Was Fu Shekfeng scared? Of course he was obviously scared. However, he fought against the panic and forcibly suppressed his instincts to retreat. His whole body, every cell, seemed to be begging him not to do so and to step back where he knew he would be protected. Fu Shekfeng could feel the stares of the other survivors prickling his back. Pity, mockery, disdain, wonder, disbelief, surprise, and many other looks with different meanings. However, he endured. The reason he endured all this, in reality, it was a very simple reason, and for many it might not be anything special. The only thing he wanted was to be able to raise his head at least once in his life. Since he was young, due to his weak constitution and as a consequence of his below-average appearance, he was always ridiculed in different ways. Fu Shekfeng, who came from a hard-working family, also wanted his parents to be proud of him. Now that the world had changed, he longed to be able to change his life, and if they were still alive, to be able to give his parents a source of security on which they could rely on in times of need. Now that a powerful person like Bai Zemin had stretched out a helping hand to him, Fu Shekfeng was willing to do anything to hold on to it. As the zombie slowly approached, Fu Shekfeng could feel his legs trembling. Still, he too advanced slowly and began to circle around the zombie, studying the creature's movements carefully. Due to Bai Zemin's actions, the whole group had no choice but to stop momentarily, and everyone's attention had been focused on what was happening on the left side of the small human rhombus. "And now what?" Liang Pang asked in frustration as he surveyed the scene. Chen He didn't know whether to laugh or cry when he saw Bai Min's reckless actions. His move practically forced everyone to stop in a place where they could be attacked at any moment. However, the only person present other than Bai Min himself who knew the reason why he was so calm was Shangguan Bingshe. She, who had practically saved his life 3 days ago, knew that very close to this place was the battlefield where the huge beetle lay dead. All the dangerous creatures nearby had been crushed by the beetle, decapitated by Bai Min, or had their brains crushed and frozen by Shangguan Bingshe herself. Therefore, the only temporary danger was some straggling zombies that definitely did not reach 100. After nearly 2 minutes of circling the zombie, Fu Shuifang finally calmed down a bit and realized that Bai Min's words were completely true. These apocalyptic creatures were incredibly slow. Suddenly, Fu Shuifang dashed to the right, causing the zombie to slowly start turning around. However, his previous move was just a feint, and he quickly moved to the left, confusing the zombie for a moment. Fu Shuifang raised his sword high in the air and slashed down with all his might, shouting to shake off his fears. Unfortunately, he couldn't concentrate due to his fear, so the sword sliced off one of the zombie's arms instead of falling on its head. However, he was not sad or disappointed. On the contrary, he was delighted, because he had finally realized that as long as he was a little careful, these mindless zombies were not as dangerous as he thought. Taking advantage of the zombie's weakened side due to the loss of a limb, Fu Shuifang silently slipped behind the zombie, and with a strong slash without much skill, he easily hacked off the infected creature's head. You have acquired the soul power of normal zombie level 3, stamina plus 3. You have leveled up to level 2. You have received 2 status points to distribute freely. As the zombie's body fell forward and blood stained the ground, Fu Shuifang was surprised when several green letters flashed in his retina. In the end, the 19-year-old was so shocked that he stood there in a daze. "Congratulations on officially entering the path of evolution," Bai Min's voice snapped him out of his surprise. He looked at him and asked, "Did I?" Bai Min didn't know whether to laugh or cry seeing the guy's dumbfounded face. In a serious voice he said, "If it wasn't you who did it, then who was it?" "I did it! I did it! Ha ha! I finally killed my first zombie!" Fu Shuifang shouted, without caring whether he attracted another monster or not. Bai Min simply looked at him but did not stop him. This guy was not only expressing his joy, but he was also shouting to shake off the lingering fear that still remained in him. After all, it wasn't easy to step forward to battle against death when you know that someone else was willing to do it for you. Moreover, none of those present mocked Fu Shuifang's childish attitude. On the contrary, they all looked at him with astonishment and disbelief, while the looks of ridicule and disdain were long gone. Fu Shuifang suddenly ran forward and picked up a white scroll that had fallen from the zombie. After hesitating for a moment after knowing what it was, he gritted his teeth and walked towards Bai Min as he said, "Big brother Bai, this skill, I give it to you." "You give it to me?" Bai Min picked up the scroll in a daze. He definitely did not expect this move. "Stealth, First Order Active Skill, Level 1. Erases your presence to some extent while weakening your body smell and the sound of your heart. It costs 10 mana points to activate and takes 4 stamina per minute to keep activated. After deactivation, it has a cooldown time of 20 minutes. You give it to me. You use it." Bai Min handed the scroll back to him and shook his head. He looked at him with appreciation and said, "Anyway, I never thought of taking what rightfully belonged to you. However, I like grateful people like you. I just hope you can continue to be like that and not get carried away by the emotion of the moment. Don't worry, big brother Bai. Although my family may be poor, my parents taught me values. Favor with favor is repaid, and this favor is so great that I will never forget it." Fu Shuifang clenched the skill scroll tightly and looked at Bai Min with eyes brimming with gratitude. Not only had Bai Zemin given him the courage he needed to fight, but he had also spoken to him with respect and even allowed him to keep a supernatural skill like the one in his hands. In this world where the strong devoured and fed on the weak, a skill, as useless as it seemed, was no different than possessing another life-saving source in times of need. Go get some rest for now. Also, I advise you to add your status points to agility and stamina. That way, with your stealth skill, you could become a terrific assassin. Bai Zemin gently patted his shoulder and advised honestly. Without hesitation, Fu Shuifeng wished to learn the skill just as Bai Zemin had told him. Then he silently handed the sword back to him before returning to the crowd with his back straight. Those who had previously glared at him now did not dare to stare at him for more than a second before looking away. Now that his initial fear was gone, as long as Fu Shuifeng maintained that courage, and as long as he was on good terms with one of the four main leaders of this group, his strength would only increase more and more. No one was foolish enough to look for trouble where there was none against such a person. "You're a mind manipulator," Lilith sneered beside him. However, even though it seemed like she was mocking, her eyes glittered with appreciation as she said, "Inflict fear first, then embarrass him with your previous talk to push them forward. Finally, give him power and respect. Kya, little Zemin, big sister loves you more and more." Bai Zemin smiled slightly before turning around and walking back. Indeed, Lilith was right. What he was doing was manipulation. Right now, Bai Zemin might be much stronger than most, but even he was not able to fight against thousands of zombies. His stamina would be drained no matter how high it was. Therefore, he urgently needed people able to follow him willingly, people able to become his sword. Lilith was also delighted that Bai Zemin had understood this so soon. After all, even she herself was not invincible, let alone he who had barely taken his first steps in this new world of evolution and death. And Bai Zemin's move also suited what Lilith needed, and was a first step to what she hoped he could one day become. The group of people soon left the corpse of the zombie decapitated by Fu Shuifeng, their first of many to come. Other zombies appeared along the way, but all were appropriately dealt with by the main fighters, placating some of the survivors' fear. Soon, however, they saw several buildings collapsed and crushed as if an earthquake had struck the earth during the night, and their gazes were filled with horror and shock. What kind of creature could do such a thing? Survivors were apprehensive about moving forward, and many could not help but stop in fear of what lay ahead.